So, I walked out of the new Suicide Squad movie, but it's not what you think. In fact, the first 15 minutes were so good and the movie theater experience was so terrible, I had to leave and watch it on HBO Max this morning. So I had a super bizarre experience with the person that checks your tickets at the movie theater, but I'll save that for the members only video. Long story short, I get in the theater, it is a packed house, first packed house I've seen since the pandemic, and people were not sitting where they were supposed to sit. There's supposed to be spaces. I was gonna let it slide, but it was a gaggle of teenage girls who were not gonna stop talking for the entire movie. And honestly, if I have to sit next to somebody in a crowded theater, I want the person who still drives around with a mask on. Obviously, they're not in the movie theater right now, but I don't want the teenage girl who carelessly sits wherever she wants, because God knows what else she's been up to. So, the movie itself, I saw the first 15 minutes in the theater, and I was pleasantly surprised. Now, I did have pretty high expectations for this movie, not only because James Gunn directed it and because I think Guardians of the Galaxy is among the better Marvel movies, but Warner Brothers was letting him make it rated R, and from everything I was hearing and seeing, it sounded like they allowed him to do whatever he wanted to do. In fact, from what I've heard, when they hired him, they told him he could change anything he wanted from the original movie. He didn't even have to cast anybody from the original, including Margot, even though the studio strongly suggested that he do, and I'm glad he did. I'll explain more why later, but in that first 15 minutes I saw, I felt like he was setting up some brilliant stuff. I was really surprised quite a few times again in the first 15 minutes before the opening credits even began. And I gotta say, not only did it not disappoint, it defied my expectations. So to clarify some of my expectations, I like James Gunn's work. I expected this to be quite good because James Gunn is not only brilliant at sort of setting up and subverting expectations. There are quite a few filmmakers working today that are good at that. James Gunn is just as good at it, but he's also brilliant at making things work specifically for movie lovers, people that love classic 80s, 70s action movies, things like that. He understands how to reference things, set up expectations you have based on your love of those movies, and then change it enough, and sometimes dramatically, to really hit you over the head and surprise you, and most importantly, entertain you. I find his movies incredibly entertaining. The Suicide Squad is no exception. And kudos to Warner Brothers for letting him do what he wanted to do. That's a hard thing to do when you're spending this much money on a movie, but it was the right bet with this guy, and I'm glad that they did it. I'll talk more about those brilliant casting choices in my spoiler talk on that members only video, but I'll also say in that first 15 minutes, not only did I think some of the casting choices were perfect, I think what they showed you, not just in trailers, but all the marketing was really brilliant as well, just really clever stuff. I'll stop gushing about the first 15 minutes and get on to the rest. Again, no spoilers.
Forgot the rep.
So resuming it today, the movie continues to surprise you just as much as it does in the beginning. In fact, it's going to surprise you so much, you're going to begin to expect the unexpected pretty regularly, and that's not a bad thing. It's miles better than just being served up what you expect, which is so often the case with these big studio superhero movies. And I'll say not only does Harley Quinn have some of that character's best moments so far in this movie, but they made much better use of Margot's talent and everybody's talent in the movie. The script just gives them a little more to work with because these are all fantastic actors. And typically in these superhero movies, with a few exceptions like Robert Downey Jr., they do tend to be kind of flat, kind of one-dimensional, stone-faced. Here, all the characters got to shine and the actors got to really show off their acting chops. But just as an example, there's a scene in the original Suicide Squad movie that is, I think, the worst one in the movie. I hate it. I've talked about it on this channel before, but they tried to show you how ruthless Viola Davis's character is by having her pick up a gun randomly and shoot a whole room full of government agents, stone-faced as can be. And because it's PG-13, there's not a drop of blood, and we don't know who any of these people are. They're essentially faceless. In fact, it's so dark, I don't even know if you can see their faces, but point is, they're trying to show how ruthless she is in the script, but you've got Viola Davis. You don't need to do something like that. Plus, it doesn't make much sense and it doesn't have much impact. Again, no blood, we don't know the people, blah, yada, yada, yada. But here, when they want to show how ruthless she is, they do it with a brilliant scene between her and Idris Elba that really shows off their acting chops. Now, I don't mean to give the impression this is like some drama that's real talky and everything. It's not. There's loads of action in the movie, but when you do have more serious moments, which there are a few to help kind of carry the story, you've got top tier actors really showing off what they can do. Again, not typically the case in these types of movies. Speaking of Idris Elba, he's top notch. I always like him. He's particularly good here. Not just good in the way that he acts, he's always good, but this was just a perfect casting choice. I loved seeing him in this Bloodsport role and would love to see a movie dedicated to him. I'm all in with this character. I loved him. I loved the suit, everything. But based on the trailers, I anticipated him to be kind of the main character, and he sort of could be, you could look at it that way, but what I was surprised by was every character has a moment where they sort of are the star of their own scene. Quite a few characters have multiple scenes like that, but everybody got a chance at bat and it never felt forced or anything. It was really organic and worked out well. This movie's, again, for this type of movie, it's incredibly well written. It's also absolutely bonkers, and when I say bonkers, I mean like Rick and Morty level bonkers. In fact, for a show like Rick and Morty that references and emulates countless movies in every single episode, The Suicide Squad might be the closest thing I've ever seen to a live-action Rick and Morty movie. But I personally loved every damn minute of it, and not only am I anxious to see some sort of a sequel to this done by James Gunn, I'm very interested to see how this holds up over time. It was a fun watch. I can't wait to watch it again. I feel like it's going to be one of my favorite movies of the year. I think it pretty easily is going to fit into the top 10 based on what I've seen so far and what's coming. But whether or not it will hold up over time is something we're just gonna have to wait and see. Now, because this is Flick Connection and my name is Darren Van Dam, I'm gonna give you a bunch of movie recommendations. All these movie recommendations are in the top pinned comment down below, and right next to them down there, I'm gonna tell you where you can currently stream them, at least in the US. They will be different in some other countries, but you can just Google where they're located. So for starters, a lot of people know James Gunn as the Guardians of the Galaxy guy, and for good reason. But before that, he did quite a few really excellent gore-fest movies. One being Slither, which is an excellent monster movie. Michael Rooker and Nathan Fillion are both in that as well. Just really gross, but also funny and fun. It feels like James Gunn. And then right on the coattails of The Office, he did one with Rainn Wilson called Super, where he thinks he's a superhero, which has been done quite a few times before, but I think for movies where someone acts like a superhero and isn't, James Gunn maybe did that the best. I would say maybe Kick-Ass is a little more fun and entertaining, but Super is really an excellent movie, even if it is a little more slowly paced than other James Gunn movies. And then he didn't direct Brightburn, but he did produce it, and that too was just this really gory, wild movie. The guy's got a good eye for it, so again, really happy that Warner Brothers let him go rated R with The Suicide Squad. Now, some 70s and 80s war movies that James Gunn has actually quoted as being influences for The Suicide Squad include The Dirty Dozen, which you can also currently catch on HBO Max. This is an excellent movie with an amazing cast. Clearly, it's very closely related to The Suicide Squad, but also movies like Inglourious Bastards. If you like that type of stuff and you've never seen this classic, I highly recommend it. The Great Escape is another one that he referenced, which is an excellent movie, but after watching The Suicide Squad, I feel like it has a little bit less in common. However, still an excellent recommendation that I do bring up on the channel at least a couple of times a year. He also mentioned Where Eagles Dare and Kelly's Heroes as two sources of inspiration, but one that he didn't mention that I think is very, very closely related is Uncommon Valor, which you can currently catch on Cinemax. In this movie, Gene Hackman puts together a ragtag group of guys and they go in to save some POWs. Excellent stuff, very, very similar to The Suicide Squad because it's a little funny as well, and it also has some really heavy moments. Just a classic movie that I highly recommend. And I was also loosely reminded of Red Dawn and Rambo. Obviously, two excellent movies. They have enough in common with The Suicide Squad, but not nearly as much as Uncommon Valor. And again, it's way too early to tell, but The Suicide Squad could hold up to some other squad type action movies. Some of the best ever would be Predator, and there are quite a few scenes in The Suicide Squad that reminded me of Predator. Aliens is another one that I was reminded of in multiple ways by the Suicide Squad. When you see it, you will know what I'm talking about. And then also Ghostbusters is kind of an obvious choice. There's something that happens in the Suicide Squad that will remind you of the original Ghostbusters as well. Those are three that are at the top of the heap in that genre. Is the Suicide Squad as good as them? Again, that's something that time will tell, but on a first viewing, I'm in love with this movie. Some other squad-type action movies currently on streaming include Six Underground, which did get a bad rap, and it's not great, which is why it didn't come out in theaters, but it is a fun watch with kind of a spirit similar to the Suicide Squad. Even though it doesn't have nearly as much action in it, I think The Usual Suspects is an excellent pairing with this movie. There's a lot in common in terms of the tone, the humor, things like that. And then another one that's very, very closely related is The A-Team, and I happen to think the PG-13 Joe Carnahan movie is excellent. It's wild, it's fun, it's crazy. You can currently catch it on Hulu, and it would make a great pairing with the Suicide Squad. And then finally, we've got the OG of all squad movies from 1954, Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. This movie would go on to spawn American remakes like The Magnificent Seven and has influenced countless action movies over the last 60, 70 years. It's all in black and white, all subtitles, it's 3.5 hours long, and it is amazing. And not just by 1954 standards, a lot of you could watch this today and really enjoy a lot of the action and story elements, especially if you do have the right frame of mind as to when this was made and what it has gone on to influence. Excellent stuff. Easily one of the best movies ever made, not only because the craft behind it was so perfect, but because it was the launch pad for so many excellent movies, of which I just named a bunch. So if I seem like I'm gushing, it's because I've got a soft spot for movies like this, and James Gunn seems to understand movie lovers like me in a way that very few directors do. So I loved it, can't wait to watch it again. Let me know in the comments below what your thoughts were on the Suicide Squad, and as always, help me thank those Patreon supporters in the comments below. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon supporter, there's a link in the video description, but there's also a link down there where you can become a channel member and get access to exclusive videos right here on YouTube, like my spoiler talk, where I'll also talk about the weirdest incident I had with the ticket stub girl, who I really hope is not watching this, but I will keep making these videos as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for watching this Suicide Squad episode, and you will see me on the next one.